This seemingly ordinary middle-aged truck driver is actually one of the most notorious serial killers in the history of China. In this video, I'll begin with his childhood experience and tell how he gradually became a monster. On August 22nd, 1954, Luo Shubiao was born in a family of ordinary workers in Guangzhou. At that time, parents who both had jobs were considered to be families with a decent income. In the eyes of Luo's parents, he was misbehaved and rebellious from an early age, but his parents didn't discipline him, which contributed to his bad behaviors during his growth. During his middle school years, he had stolen from classmates several times and had obscene behavior towards girls, such as deliberately touching their breasts with his elbow. However, he only received verbal warnings and was not punished substantively when his parents and teachers discovered his behaviors. In 1972, Luo graduated from high school and was unemployed at home. He wandered the streets every day and soon met a group of hoodlums and started to steal things with them. From passers-by to shops to factories, the items he stole became larger and more valuable. In 1974, he was arrested by the police for theft and imprisoned for 2 years. This prison experience made Luo feel indignant. He thought that he was just stealing something. Why should he be punished for 2 years that long? In prison, his only thought was that it was unfair and society owed him. After being released from prison without income and unwilling to work, Luo began to steal things again, but an accident happened. At 2 a.m. on August 2nd, 1977, after several days of scouting, Luo climbed over the wall and sneaked into a female employee dormitory building of an electrical research institute. He chose this dorm building because of its simple structure and easy-to-open lock. While Luo was fumbling with a drawer in one of the dormitories, the sound woke up the sleeping owner, Feng Liyun. Feng immediately shouted for security, and her screams made Luo very afraid of being found. So he lifted the iron on the table and smashed it on Feng's head until she was motionless. Then Luo fled in a hurry with blood all over his hands. Soon after, the dying Feng was found by her colleague and sent to the hospital, but she died after emergency treatment. After this incident, Luo stayed at home for a long time and feared that his actions would be discovered. He looked out from the balcony every day to see if there were police coming to arrest him. Unfortunately, due to the limited criminal investigation methods at that time, the police didn't find out who the murderer was. They could only extract fingerprints and temporarily shelve the case. This incident made Luo suddenly realize that it was so easy to kill a person and get away. Therefore, he continued to steal, and his criminal methods became more and more skilled. He even accumulated anti-detection experience, like how to create false clues to confuse the police. These experiences greatly helped him later when he became a serial killer. In January 1979, the rampant Luo was arrested again by the police. Due to his criminal record, his punishment was increased, and he was sentenced to 3 years imprisonment. In 1982, after being released from prison, Luo's parents introduced him to Xiang, a woman 5 years older than him. Luo concealed his prison history and married Xiang a few months later. From the time Luo first stole till he was executed, he only didn't commit crimes in the few months he and his wife were dating. A few months after marriage, Xiao was pregnant, which meant their expenses would increase in the future. Luo believed that stealing was the fastest way to get money, so he did it again. In February 1983, Luo was arrested by the police for the 3rd time and sentenced to a 4.5-year imprisonment. Luo spent half of his best 10 years in prison, but he didn't realize his mistakes or repent. Instead, he became resentful. He felt that he had high intelligence and ability, but society didn't give him the opportunity to show his talents, which forced him to steal. During his 3rd imprisonment, Luo often mixed with rapists, listening them to tell how they abused women and how powerless and weak the victims were in their hands. Luo was fascinated by their experiences. In 1987, after being released from prison, Luo found a job as a truck driver. To outsiders, several years of prison life had changed him. However, the truth was, he transferred his anger towards society to sexual desire. When he was not working, he stole women's underwear. All the underwear he stole were cherished in a room that only he could enter. In addition, he became fascinated with watching porn full of violence. After being arrested, Luo confessed that whenever he saw scenes of violence, sexual harm and dismemberment, he felt excited and wanted to try it. In his view, the act of cutting off the sexual organs of victims was much more exciting than collecting underwear. He also asked his wife to role-play with him to imitate the scene in the porn, but her performance was not satisfactory, so he chose to whore to satisfy himself instead. From 1989 to September 1994, Luo often drove a light truck around the city late at night, looking for prostitutes and bringing them to a secluded location near his home for sex. According to his account, he had had sex with over 260 prostitutes. After being accustomed to prostitution, Luo's threshold for sex was raised, and ordinary sex could no longer satisfy him. In 1990, Luo used the types of victims in porn as a blueprint to find ordinary women as targets. The evening of February 7th, 1990, is the start of his serial killing. That night, after watching the porn, Luo couldn't suppress his desire to commit crimes. He drove the truck around the city, looking for the target. After more than 2 hours, he found one, a young girl who was on her way alone. Luo parked the truck next to the girl and lowered the window to ask if she wanted a ride. The girl hesitated a little bit, but got into Luo's truck finally. To her surprise, he drove all the way out of town. When the girl realized the danger, they already arrived at Luo's planned crime scene, a secluded stone factory near a dairy farm. The next day, a half-naked female corpse was found by passers-by here. It was the girl who got into Luo's car last night. After the forensic autopsy, it was found that the girl had traces of struggle on her body and fingerprints on her neck. The cause of death was mechanical asphyxiation. In addition, after the girl's death, the body had been violated, and there was a small amount of semen left in her body. This case was judged as a rape and murder case by the public at that time, and the criminal investigation team was responsible for the investigation. However, due to the high mobility of Guangzhou's population at that time, coupled with no witnesses or cameras at the crime scene, the case became a pending case for a while. On the other hand, after killing the girl, Luo was as terrified as he was when he killed Feng the last time. The next morning after the crime, he went to the scene of the body dump to check for any traces that he might have left. For a long time, he dared not commit another crime because he already had killed 2 persons. However, 1 year later, the police still hadn't made any progress, which made Luo think that the police wouldn't find him since he and the victim had no relationship. He recalled the exciting process of raping the corpse last time and quickly formulated a plan for his next crime. On February 26, 1991, 1 year after Luo's second murder, he drove in the suburbs to search for the target. Around 12 o'clock that evening, he saw a young woman waiting alone at a bus stop. Luo learned after talking with the woman that she came from Zhengzhou City to work in Guangzhou and was going to take a bus to stay with her relative for one night. Luo told her that he was going to the same place and could give her a ride. So the woman agreed. But upon arriving at the destination, the woman who was about to get out of the truck was stopped by Luo, who used his body to suppress her and severely squeezed her neck, just like he did with the previous victim. After the victim died, Luo dragged the body to a nearby forest and raped her. The next day, the police received a report and found the body of the victim. Through examining the semen left on the body, the police determined that both homicides were committed by people of the same blood type. However, due to the lack of key clues, the 2 homicides hadn't been solved. This made Luo even more rampant. He no longer waited 1 year to commit the next crime like before. Since 1991, he committed crimes every 2 to 3 months. he imitated the murder methods in R-rated films. From August to October 1991, Luo murdered 2 more girls. On both occasions, after raping and killing the girls, he cut off their breasts, genitals, and some skin with a knife carried by him. In less than 2 years, 4 victims were killed. The time of death was getting closer, and the damage to the body was getting worse. In late 1991, the police listed this serial rape and murder case as a key case that must be solved, and set up a special task force for it, with 30 elite police officers from the city to investigate. Fortunately, the police finally found a witness. A van driver had passed by the crime scene when Luo killed the 4th girl. The driver told the police that he had seen a light truck parked with the engine on near the body dumping site that night. The driver's door of the truck was open, but there was no one in it. The driver didn't notice anything abnormal until he learned that there was a murder nearby. Then he realized that he might have passed by the killer, so he told the police. But he didn't see the license plate number and specific model of the truck. Since only knowing the killer's vehicle was a light truck, the police could only set up checkpoints at traffic arteries at night to check drivers who were driving light trucks. This method of carpet search consumed a lot of manpower, but had little effect. After seeing the news that the police had deployed an investigation, Luo considered it for a while and decided to change his type of target. Previously, he tended to find ordinary women, but such women always struggled and resisted very hard and would shout for help, greatly increasing the risk of being discovered. He believed that prostitutes were more cooperative and less vigilant. Therefore, he later preferred to find victims when prostituting. As for the screening criteria, it was whether they were obedient. He brutally killed those who resisted his degrading behaviors, who required him to wear condoms, who didn't allow him to have sex twice, who checked his license plate when getting on the truck, and who demanded payment for prostitution when he left without paying. In 1992, after committing several more crimes, Luo became more and more daring. On several occasions, he brought the bodies of the victims back to his place, slept with them, raped them, and even cut up the bodies at home. When the bodies began to rot, he drove them to the wilderness and discarded them. Although Luo lived in the house with his wife and children, he didn't allow anyone to enter his private room he built on top of the house. Every time Luo brought a body home, it was close to midnight, a time when his family was asleep. Usually, when his son and daughter went upstairs out of curiosity, they were stopped by their mom, who told them not to go there. Otherwise, Daddy will get angry. Therefore, for 4 years, Luo's 2 kids never suspected that their father was a murderer and even thought of him as a good father. On one of his daughter's birthdays, Luo gave her an expensive watch, which he stole from the deceased. As for Luo's wife, she had always pretended to not know of his prostitution behavior. When she noticed the occasional presence of strange women's underwear and jewelry around him, she turned a blind eye. She also gladly accepted the underwear and clothes that Luo gave her. In 1993, when Luo brought the corpse home to dismember it, he accidentally knocked over the basin containing the blood, and the blood flowed down under the door. Luo's wife, who was doing chores at home, was frightened when she saw the large amount of blood on the stairs, so she knocked on the door to ask Luo what happened. Luo said that he was too sleepy to drive last night and hit a woman on the side of the road. He thought that it would be expensive to take her to the hospital, so he took her home to recover first. He didn't expect that she would die, so he had to dispose of her body. Luo begged his wife to help him, otherwise he would go to prison. After hearing this, Luo's wife cleaned up all the blood-stained areas in the house, while Luo abandoned the corpses in the wild. In 1994, the police increased their force for the 3rd time. Nearly 100 police officers were dedicated to investigating this serial murder and rape case, but they were still unable to prevent the increase of victims. At 2 a.m. on September 20th, a young woman named Jia Hong ran to the police station to report that she had almost been killed. Recalling the scary scene, Jia was terrified. She told the police that she came to Guangzhou City to find a job, but her wallet was stolen when she just got off the train. It was late at night at that time. Jia, who was penniless, didn't know what to do. At this moment, a middle-aged man drove a light truck passing by her and stopped, asking if she wanted a ride. In order to reassure her, the man took out the old police uniform and showed it to her, telling her that he was a policeman. After thanking the man for his help, she got in the truck. At first, Jia thought she was quite lucky to meet a kind guy, but as the truck was driving in a more and more desolate direction, she began to feel nervous. Before she came to Guangzhou, she had heard about a serial murder. The more she thought about it, the more suspicious she felt about this man. When the truck drove into a remote village, her fear reached the highest. She opened the door, jumped out, and ran as far as she could. Hearing the footsteps of the man behind her, she felt that she would be caught up by this man sooner or later if she kept running like this. At this moment, she found a garbage dump at the corner ahead, which was a good place to hide. So she hid in the garbage dump for more than 2 hours before she slowly got up preparing to leave. Unexpectedly, the man had been standing nearby waiting for her to get out. Seeing Jia leaving the hiding place, the man immediately rushed up and choked her neck, attempting to kill her. Fortunately, Jia was taller than the man, and there was a car passing by on the road, which allowed her to break free from the man and finally run away. Upon hearing Jia's description, the police officer found that the perpetrator's modus operandi was very similar to the serial killer that the police had been looking for in recent years. Jia also told the police that she saw the man driving to Huangpu village eventually. Then the police took out the photos of suspects living in this area that they had previously collated and showed them to her one by one for identification. Soon, she identified Luo, who lived in Huangpu village. Early the next morning, a large number of police officers went to Luo's home and found that he was not there. Faced with the sudden arrival of the police, Luo's wife seemed surprised. When asked about Luo's whereabouts at first, she said that he had gone to work. After being persuaded by the police, Luo's wife confessed that Luo told her that he would go to work in another city for a few days and asked her to withdraw all the savings from the bank and go to the train station to meet with him. An hour later, Luo was arrested. Before the police found Luo, they searched his home. When they went upstairs to his house, a locked room appeared in their eyes. The police officers present had a hunch that this case, which had been bothering them for 5 years, should be solved. Since Luo's family didn't have the key to the room, the police could only break into it. The scene in the room was shocking to the police. Some female private parts were dried and placed on shelves. The pillows on the bed were made of various female underwear. In the storage locker, there were panties and bras of the victims. On the desk, there was a diary of Luo with a cover titled Fast Food. The diary detailed the date, location, clothing of the victims, and the crime processes. These eventually became hard evidence of his crime. Luo, who had repeatedly committed crimes successfully, was complacent and thought he was smarter than the police. He didn't know that the police had gradually narrowed the scope of the suspects after several years of investigation. Even without Jia's report, he would be caught soon. The police found clear ruts on the road near the body dumping site, which allowed them to speculate on the model of the truck driven by the killer. According to the victims' dresses, appearances, and the locations of the body dumping sites, the police believed that the killer was very familiar with Huangpu village and had a stable family, which was why the crime time was fixed at late night. He had other criminal behaviors such as prostitution and molestation of women. This person might rely on the individual transportation industry for a living, at least with a 0.6-ton light truck at home. These characteristics were all very close to Luo. After being arrested, Luo confessed to his crimes. During each interrogation, he talked about the satisfaction he felt during the crime without showing any remorse for the victims. Luo killed 18 people in total. He was sentenced to death for several crimes and was executed on January 20th, 1995. Ironically, his case became the creative prototype for R-rated movies, the type of which he loved to watch and even imitated.